everybody. This is Dr. Josh Long, and you are here watching AME Podcast, a way to ensure, hopefully, continuing music education throughout the years. My focus and sponsor has been through Art and Music Emporium, which is serving artistic excellence. We do things such as instrument repair, adult-focused lessons, and as well as arts and supplies. We also do a performance art initiative, which is called the annual Community Band by the Sea, which is down in Wildwood, New Jersey. So if that's something that interests you, do look for that. That usually happens in July of every year. If you like what you see, please like us on Facebook. Art and Music Emporium's on there, as well as please like us and subscribe to YouTube, as well as we do have a Patreon account that if you are interested in putting anything towards, it all goes to continuing music making. I'm really excited about our guest here with us, Dr. Tim Kaiser. He's actually from the Oklahoma Baptist University. Sorry, I put university before the cart. He's been a educator in Texas and California, a fine music educator who went also to get his DMA in conducting. And really exciting is his research in the obscure band works of Frank Simon. And also I love to see his, and hear his thoughts about Ives, Percy Grainger, and Edgar Varese, one of my favorites. So anyway, so we're excited to talk. We're going to talk about continuing music education. And Tim, why don't you take it away?
All right. Well, thank you so much. So Varese is a favorite.
Yes, yeah, Varese. Yeah, I actually really enjoy
know
Varese.
that about you. Yeah.
It's a good way to start, isn't it?
Yeah, this is we might work our way there eventually, but I mean, thank you for having me. This is great. It's nice to actually finally talk to you. We've been corresponding through Facebook and etc. But it's nice to put a face to all that, and through the miracle of Zoom, right?
That's right.
Which can bring back some memories, but also allows us to do something like this. This is great. So yeah, I'm at Oklahoma Baptist University, which is about 35 miles east of Oklahoma City. We're a small, probably about 1,400 or so and growing student population, small Christian liberal arts university. We had a division of music within that that's been operational for over 110 years now. And we're pretty proud of the legacy we've been able to create. Here, we seem to have skipped autumn. Okay. We went from about 90 degrees to about 20 overnight. And so that's where we are, and our central heating still hasn't kicked in.
Oh.
So that's kind of the position we're in here in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Moderate sized town of about 30,000 people, with, like I said, kind of a rich history of music making. Continues to this day. Part of my job is I conduct a community orchestra. It's a unique kind of hybrid ensemble. It includes students from the university, alumni, and what I call friends of OBU, which could be anybody. It's people who have day jobs in music, who are working music educators, retired music educators, people who have day jobs in other disciplines, who just love to come and play on a Monday night. So anywhere from students, we even have one high school student, to kind of semi-professional and professional members. It's a highlight of my time here to actually see these people who are making this whole music thing happen.
Awesome.
In addition, obviously, to working with students who are on the cusp of, I'm sure, very successful careers in education and performance and whatever they have ahead of them. We also, actually, Shawnee is home to two other community groups. We have a community big band, and we have a community chorus, and those aren't affiliated with the university, but I thought I'd mention them. Fairly impressive for a small-ish town of 30,000. So it's a great place to be for community music making.
So one question I had as you kind of jumped into the community orchestra and the big band and all those kind of things. So let me ask you this: as far as we'll talk about the players first, if that's okay. So it's kind of having a mix of college students. We'll talk about the orchestra, obviously, first. Kind of this mix of, students, and you have people that are out there who, probably professionals, and then, people who probably consider them as an amateur, or, well, I sort of play my instrument, right? They'll say something like that. So one question I had for you is, being in a conductor role, what do you do with all those, levels of learning, at once, right? Because it's very interesting to me. And I go right there just because I'm a true believer that people have to be challenged, right? Because if not, I think they get bored. That's just me. But I was interested in finding out what your thoughts are as far as, what you do as far as, helping those folks with their music making.
Well, that's the tricky part of a group like this, and you absolutely hit it on the head with just such a wide variety of abilities and learning styles and reasons for being in the group. I obviously have music majors who are I need to experience this in order to, fill out a resume and experience the totality of what professional music making can be. We have students who just show up to continue their musical journey, just continue to play on a Monday night, and community members who do it for the same reason. But I think everyone has this in common, that when they show up, they expect to be challenged. They expect to show up for something worthwhile. We have people who drive in from as far away as Oklahoma City, which is about a half an hour, 40 minutes,
Wow.
depending on where you're coming from. And even the Tulsa metro area, which is closer to an hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Mm-hmm.
So giving these folks something to really sink their teeth into is important. So
Really?
I pour through endless scores, looking for things that appeal. I take suggestions from the members of the group.
Awesome.
Something that we've been very successful in doing is featuring members of our faculty as well.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
To encourage kind of buy-in into what we're doing, and to get our community folks the opportunity to play with some truly great performers. This past week, we did a concert. The centerpiece was Mozart's 23rd Piano Concerto with
Okay.
Franklin, our piano professor, which is an engaging piece of music, of course, for the soloist, but also for the orchestra. We found that was a concerto where the interactions between the soloist and the orchestra were particularly engaging. And if nothing else, but from an endurance standpoint, really challenging for folks to pull off. They love the challenge. They embrace it. They especially like the opportunity to perform with someone like Mark. And we preface that, kind of our little appetizer to open the program was Mozart's 3 German dances, and then we ended with the Peer Gynt Suite #1.
Oh, nice.
So quite a program.
Yeah, quite.
It's a step or two up from what the connotation might be when you hear the words community orchestra.
Right.
We're lucky enough, like I said, to have this wide range of abilities, but that also includes, for example, our principal string players who are, semi-professional players, everyone in between, everyone on down. Oklahoma, in the public schools, does not have a whole lot of orchestra programs.
Okay.
So there is not a big pipeline as far as the high schools to hear of string players. And so I've actually worked with several that are in existence that are really wonderful. But just there is kind of a statewide lack of that. And so the community orchestra model has worked really well for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. And just to fill you in a little bit, we kind of have the same thing in the Northeast. We have it's kind of, we have some great schools. I'm not dissing the whole state or the states, I should say, but it's kind of far and few between. Bands seem to kind of stuck, throughout the program. But speaking of that, and I'm just interested, you mentioned this word, and if you don't mind me asking, you said we're kind of a prestige kind of community orchestra group. Like more than quite, not, maybe not prestige was the word, but more than just community. And that's why I'm just interested in it. I'll tell you what I'm thinking of is usually people kind of color these community groups. Oh, it's just the town group, it's just whoever wants to be in it, they're okay kind of thing. And it sounds like you have like quite an impressive like program happening with community groups. And of course, I mean, I know there's music majors in that too as well. And I know that's filling out the department and everything, but I was just interested in if you can explain more of like, and that kind of goes to where I'm getting at why people drive 45 to an hour to your house, minutes, or to not your to your house, to the actual program to play, So I'm just interested if you want to if you have any thoughts on that as far as like the engagement aspect of that community group that is really appealing to somebody, that makes it feel like you said. I mean, it's almost I feel the way you're sounding, it sounds pretty professional to me. So, which I think kudos to you, by the way. But
we try. And the great thing about music in general is that it can be an incredibly enriching and rewarding profession. I mean, as we all know, there are a number of avenues to go with that, more so than many people realize, but also just an incredibly enriching and rewarding lifetime pursuit. A hobby, if you will, although I don't want to trivialize what it is.
Yep.
There is indeed something universal about music, and whether or not it's a language, I'm not sure. Frankly, I've always considered the word language to be a bit reductive when we're talking about music, but that's
understood.
That's another podcast and another discussion. But
that's right.
There's something universal to where anyone can enjoy it and embrace it, and that I think is unique to what we do. I mean, I don't think there's such a thing as amateur dentistry, for example, and that's probably a good thing. But but anyone who's ever picked up an instrument or sung in a choir can enjoy a lifetime of music making, and I think there's something beautiful about that. I think it's something that there's something built into us. It's something we thirst for and seek out. There's not a whole lot that I need to do as the leader of a group like that, other than to make people aware that we're here, this opportunity exists, and hopefully to perform at a high level, and just to kind of open the door and build it, and they will come. It is part of who we are. And it's really, really gratifying for me to see these people who have found multiple ways to continue in music. And I'll tell you this, and you've probably had the same experience. Some of just the flat out best players I've ever encountered don't have degrees or formal training in music. I mean, you look at some of the past century's greatest musicians. Take a Miles Davis or something. He spent some time at Juilliard and then decided no, and went his own way and did his own thing, and he did all right.
Yeah, right.
And I just love the multitude of paths that music can take us, and I love to see the ways in which people have followed those.
Right. Well, it's like one of the composers you followed, Charles Ives, right? Music wasn't his day job. Insurance salesman, I believe, if I remember correctly.
So.
Yeah, and it's amazing, is exactly that, because and that's something to talk about, just because you think about that in a way of when people are making music, it does a degree define that. And I mean, I know I'm a higher ed teacher. I'm a music teacher like everyone else, and we like to give those and award those to those folks. But is that important as far as, because of skill? I mean, just like you said, I mean, I have met some phenomenal players, and they just do it for fun. Absolutely for fun. And they're the best soloists I've ever heard. So there's something to say about that. And I'm always a true believer, and this is me throwing something into the realm, but when I started students back in public school, the ones that actually want to be there, they're the ones that I love the most. And not that I don't love all my students and want to help them and get them through, but it's something special when they're driven to learn to make music, and it seems like that's what's happening.
And although I would certainly never dissuade anyone from pursuing a degree in music, I of course agree with all of that. There's a lot that a degree can do for you, and especially if you have a specific career path in mind. As a conductor, I always tell students that conducting, for example, is really the synthesis of what we are as musicians. It's where your music theory and history and pedagogy classes and studio lessons and everything all come into play and converge. It's the synthesis of all that, and it's in many ways the fullest realization of all that. Having to step on a podium and engage in something that's rather arrogant, if you think about it, to say to a group of people, this is how this piece of music goes. Thank you very much. It's so many words. That's obviously not all we do. It's a collaborative act, and the best conductors approach it as such. But yeah, that's something that a formal education in music can do for you. Other than that, there are no guarantees in life, and sometimes all a degree can do is enable you to apply for certain positions.
Yep. I understand that.
So I would never for a moment discourage anyone from pursuing the study of music.
Right.
And in fact, it's necessary to constantly remind people that music is something that is worthy of in-depth study and scholarship and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's the multidimensionality of what we do.
Yep.
That I think is so special and sets it apart from a lot of other avocations, I guess, hobbies, that we could pursue.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. Like I'm there with the degrees too. I'm just fascinated of, and I'll bring this up. My one, and he went to a different route. He didn't go to college, but he went to the Army, and he went through the Army band, and he phenomenal tuba player. And he didn't really have any degrees when he was teaching me. He was teaching me in college, but it was because of his experiences. But his training was very formalized, and it was very much in study of music with the theory, the pedagogy. So it's like, yes, that's all valuable, as that kind of rolls in there. Not to move us along, but I'm just interested to see how your community orchestra kind of compares to the other community groups that you were talking just a little bit about. Do you see the same sort of participation, the same sort of love for music? I guess that's the best way to say it. And I'm just interested of how it compares. I don't know if you're involved with it. I don't know that, but I'm just interested, just because I'm always interested about community groups.
Yeah, of course. I'm not affiliated with either the community chorus or the community big band, but one thing I can speak to is the longevity of all three community groups. And the demand for what we're able to provide. We fill a good portion, actually, of our 400-seat auditorium when the community orchestra plays, and that's pretty impressive as far as concert attendance to begin with. And concert attendance for, and I hate to keep saying this, and a community type of group. It's something the community has embraced, and I can say that for all three groups. We've been in existence for over 20 years now. I think the others can boast kind of a similar record of longevity, and so I think the demand for this music and the interest from the community something that all three groups have in common, and that's very rewarding to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, and by any means, don't feel like I'm asking to rate the community groups. That's not what I'm looking at. It's more about the participation. It's because, I feel, and we actually talked a little bit about this when we spoke before starting this podcast, was, and this is something I want to kind of get your insight with is, I've learned a lot of people. I have friends in high school and who are in all state groups and, and ensembles that were just phenomenal players. And then high school ends, college ends, and that's it. They're done. I mean, they put down their instrument, and even though I've tried to contact them and get them involved with other groups, they're, oh, I'm too busy. I have life, kids, jobs. There's a million excuses, which we all have, and I get that, but I was interested in getting your kind of philosophy of that, being involved with a hybrid ensemble, being involved with, music making as a lifelong endeavor. What do you tell your students when, and I mean, some of them obviously are music majors and they're going to continue on, but I will throw this out there. I've met a lot of music teachers who don't play anymore. They teach music, but they're not active in it anymore. And I'm just interested to see what your thoughts were about that. And what do you do for your students or even members of the community group, to push that avenue of continuing in music education or
Yeah, so
music?
there's a number of different directions to go here.
Huh?
I was a public school music educator for over 15 years, and we ask an awful lot of our students in public school music programs. And by and large, they give it to us. I mean, they're incredible what students are able to achieve. Sometimes to the extent that you have to step back and remind yourself, wow, these are teenagers doing this. And so a couple of things. One, first to your point about just continuing to play and be active
Yep.
for your own musical growth and development. The town in which I started off teaching, the local community college had a music educators band.
Oh, wow.
And we met every Tuesday night and, had a good old time and played some great music and got to stay fresh on our instruments. And that was incredible, not just for the collegiality of it, because
Sure.
sometimes, and this is another podcast too, sometimes it's easy to feel that we're alone in the world of what we do. It's easy to become isolated in our
Yep.
and it sounds like you know exactly what I'm talking about. But
Yep.
but also a funny thing happens when you hang around student musicians is that your ears start to adapt to what they do. Um, you start, for example, to fool yourself into thinking that, oh, the pitch center that my band has developed is good and desirable. Well, no. It's good to take a step back, sit down with colleagues, and really redefine what good music making is. We all need that refresher and that reminder, and we all need to do it ourselves. Early in my career, I was fortunate enough to do a concert with Mick Gillette from Tower of Power.
Wow.
He was their brass guy for many, many years.
Yep.
And, just called him out of the blue. We were in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I was born and raised and began teaching. And I knew they were local and called him and asked if he'd ever be interested in performing with a high school jazz band. And his response was funny. It was, wow, yeah, I'd love to do that. He said, what made you think of me? I'm thinking, well, okay, yeah. Decide who you are. Okay, that's great. So he was totally humble and really everything you could have wanted him to be. It was a great experience. But I tell you this because there was one rehearsal. We're standing there in front of all my students, and he turns to me and says, well, what instrument do you play? So, well, I play the trumpet, and I refrained from saying just like you, because I don't and I didn't. But and his next question immediately was, "Oh, do you still play?" And at the time I did, I was playing quite actively.
Okay.
Something I'd like to get back into is playing a lot more frequently. We all say that.
Yes, we do.
But at the time, early in my career, as a younger person with fewer obligations, I was playing several times a week. And so I was able to honestly say, yes, I do continue to play. And immediately in front of all my students, he said, well, good, because you really wouldn't have any credibility as a teacher with me if you didn't.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, first of all, I answered that correctly. And second of all, this is how these guys see that. I used to work with a football coach who said, if you've never taken a snap, you have no business coaching a football team.
Right.
That's analogous here too. So yeah, as far as continuing to hone our own craft, I mean, what could be more important? Whether on the playing side or the teaching side, or ideally both.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that you bring up analogies, about coaching. And I'm not a real big sports fan, but obviously, I've been to many football games and basketball games within our profession. But it's the coaches that run alongside the group, the coaches that are out there in there playing. I mean, I have been known to, we'll be short an instrument once in a while, and if we can have someone up in front, I'll play. I'm a low brass guy, so doing all of that and showing the students that you still play, I think is remarkable. And that's funny that you've heard that from, such a professional, because I think we lose scope as a music teacher, just because it gets busy like everywhere else, because, our profession's more about our students. And I get that. but it's also about the craft too, you know.
Well, and I'll say that burnout is real. It can be, and it can be for them too. And I said a couple of minutes ago, we ask a great deal of our students.
Yep.
Sometimes we have to step back and realize, wow, every minute that I'm at school doing this thing, they're doing it too.
They're doing it too. Yep.
And so we're asking them to be completely 100% involved and bought in.
Mm-hmm.
And that can lead to burnout. And sometimes, to your earlier question, I think a lot of students perceive that they've kind of been there and done that whole music or band thing.
Right.
So maybe there's no need to continue after high school. I've done that, or
Right.
even going into high school. I found as a high school teacher for many years, I had to convince students that no, there's more to the band thing. Come and join us and see what it's all about. And certainly there is more to music than high school band or anything else could encapsulate. And I think how we present that to folks is there's a quote from Frederick Fennell that I love, and I think works its way into every conference presentation I give. And he says, we must learn to teach music, not band, not orchestra, not choir, but music itself. And it's inculcating that lifelong love for music, and not making it so specific to the activity or the needs of the moment. Teaching them skills that can translate to any musical context, teaching in such a way that yields independent players, which is something that, frankly, it took me too long to realize. I remember starting off in the profession and, thinking that all the boxes were being checked as a brand new teacher. We're doing well competitively. We're giving these great concerts at home. I have wonderful relationships with my colleagues and administrators and parents in the community and all that. Look at me. I'm a band director. I'm doing everything that we should do. I'm ticking all those items off. But at the time, perhaps graduating students who weren't as prepared to succeed in really any musical context as they could have been. And so that was a shift in my thinking. I started incorporating things like ensemble sight reading, things like more instrument-specific instruction, things like that into the daily rehearsal. And it became less and less about this concert or contest repertoire and more about developing holistically the musician. So yeah, I think when our focus is too narrow, that burnout can happen.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. 'Cause I know, we all talk about the repertoire and the concerts and pleasing the audience and all of those kind of things. And it is
important.
Yeah, it is. I'm not saying anything that's not, but it definitely is about what you can equip them. I mean, and it's just something I want to share. And I've taken a couple different routes, but kind of I agree with you. That's where I'm at. I've been a music teacher for years, and I started realizing I wanted to teach them things about their instruments, for example. That was another side of it where I had a concert where there was an easy spring that came off a flute and I didn't know how to fix it. So they had to fake the concert and I didn't like that. So that's how I got into instrument repair. And I've passed that on to them. I know they can't fix all their instruments all the time, but if it's something simple that they can, diagnose, they can be an all-around musician with instrument repair, with thinking, with theory, with pedagogy, and that's something to say, as far as being an all person musician. And that's great to hear from you. I'm just ecstatic about that. So one question I had with you, just kind of shift of how we met through research. I know, one thing is East Coast Band Conference, which I know you're interested in coming out to, and I know you're really interested into historic bands and historic music making and those kind of things. And I was just wondering, I have a few questions about that. And one question to start off is, how do you find that, realm of research for yourself? I mean, I know you're interested in it and I know, you like that, but how do you find that helps you as far as a teacher, helping others? And then also this idea of continuing music making, how do you find those, Frank Simon, for example, we'll start there. His look and take of what you did on your I believe your dissertation, if I remember correctly, and I'm not saying that, you adapted it to that, but I'm just interested in how you seeing research kind of plays a role into this whole thing too, as well. That's kind of how I wanted to shift my gear, if that makes sense. A good segue, maybe.
Right. Well, there's a lot there, and you can feel free to prod me in any direction you
Sounds
want.
good.
I just love history in general. So of course the history of what I do is no exception.
Yep.
And the Frank Simon Project came about at the University of Arizona, where I did my DMA, and where Frank Simon taught for 10 years in retirement.
Okay.
To back up, let's just define our terms here. So
Yeah, sure.
Frank Simon, a lot of people know of as John Philip Sousa's cornet soloist.
Yep.
From 1914 to 1921, he succeeded Herbert L. Clark, probably the most famous Sousa cornet soloist. And then after that, he went on to have a very successful career, rose to national prominence as conductor of the ARMCO band, which was an industrial band. And so that's another facet of community making that is absolutely fascinating. Industrial bands affiliated with a certain industry, or in this case, factory, were very much a part of the American musical landscape from the Civil War on well into the mid 20th century. And at one time, right around the beginning of the Great Depression, there were well over 600 industrial bands in the United States. It was quite a phenomenon. So sidebar or whatever.
Yeah.
But
not to interrupt you, I actually just wanted to say, just so you know, because why I'm thinking of it, Bethlehem Steel Company Band is Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I did some research on that, and it was literally what you said. It was a big industry band. And what was kind of cool with it is they had a clubhouse with running water in it, which attracted all their members. So that's another discussion. But definitely industrial bands are something great. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No, that's fine. So Frank Simon, like I said, became nationally prominent in his role as conductor of the ARMCO band, which started out, interestingly enough, as a purely industrial band with plant employees and their families and things like that. He provided the instruments. He provided the instruction on these instruments. He was wholly and completely invested in this. The band was disbanded due to the Great Depression in 1929. But then Simon was given permission to reconstitute it and essentially form a different ensemble for appearances on radio.
Cool.
And was then allowed to recruit members from Sousa's band. At one point, he had 14 Sousa musicians playing for him. From the Cincinnati Symphony, he was based in the Cincinnati area, and from other ensembles of that caliber. And so it became much more than just your average factory band. It was one of the most prominent bands of its type, and through their radio broadcasts, they became heavily involved in the school music education program as well. And after that, for the last few decades of his life, he was a prominent conductor, clinician, adjudicator, had a lot of contact with school and university music programs. And that was what he most wanted to be remembered for. So the upshot of that is he's been largely forgotten for one reason or another. Like so many figures who just fade into history. If he is remembered, he's remembered for his cornet solos, which are great, but don't even begin to total everything he was or did. At Arizona, we were able to locate manuscripts to these marches that he composed, which were kind of in the Sousa vein, but not completely. There really is no direct comparison. Some aspects of them, they harken back to a pre-Sousa aesthetic, and other aspects kind of chart the way forward for march composition and composition in general. And it was fascinating to just be able to touch and handle these handwritten parts. I started off naively thinking, okay, I'm going to write a study of this music. And you know what? To facilitate this, I'm just going to plug these into Finale here and make some scores so I can examine them that way. Well, there were 5 marches we had access to. Little did I know that because a lot of the parts were handwritten, and because the ones that weren't were self-published, quite literally in his house by his wife.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
they were just riddled with errors and inconsistencies and what
Mm.
have you. So at least, oh goodness, 1 to 200 corrections per piece, and several more than that in some instances. So
Hmm.
huge bulk of my time went into preparing what are now these performance editions. Actually, that was the upshot of that, which was excellent. And
Awesome.
so the project kind of showed itself to me. So
Hmm.
it began with just an interest in learning about our heritage, about someone who was this towering figure. And certainly we can learn from anyone who's part of our
Hmm.
past and who's enriched uh, the repertoire, the teaching of music.
Hmm.
A big section of the document itself is actually on performance practice,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
which is not really written down anywhere. This was something that was passed from generation to generation of band members through word of mouth. This was intentional. So, as Sousa put it, if everyone knew these techniques, then every band would sound like the Sousa band. He was afraid
Right.
of being
Right.
ripped off. I
Yep.
don't know if every band would have sounded like the Sousa band, but
Right.
that was the fear. And kind of documenting all those, which was another gift that Frank Simon gave us, was a lot of documentation of performance practice.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I don't know how a project like that couldn't appeal to or
Hmm.
excite someone in our position.
Right. Sure.
So
And,
both as a fan of history and as an active practitioner.
practitioner, right? And I'm
Mhm.
interested. You said you got him in finale, and this is on I haven't even asked you yet. Have you performed any of them? As far
I,
as
well, only in, well, yes. Okay. So I have
okay.
conducted a couple of them in public concerts.
Oh, awesome.
And the wind ensemble there did read through all five. And
Okay.
of course, there's the lecture recital component
Yeah.
of
Yep.
any performance degree.
Hmm.
And so we did that.
Yep.
But yeah, a couple of them have gotten some public airings.
That's
And
awesome.
I find that players enjoy them
Okay.
on a purely musical level, and then on the historical level, that just adds another layer for them. So
That's awesome. Yeah. And did that was my next question. I mean, did you get any feedback from you've already kind of answered the player side of it, but anything from the audience as far as that, just, like a and again, I don't know how you presented them, but I'm always interested in kind of this captivating of, I look at this mecca of engagement, right? Being when just like we talked about earlier, the audience is excited, the band members are excited, you're excited, everyone's excited about what's going on, and that's to me a really meaningful making, performance. And I don't know how, like I said, how you performed them, but did you get any feedback from audience members or anybody, anything
I
that's
think there's something about marches, especially well-crafted ones. Obviously, they just work, and they worked then and they work now.
Mhm.
Really do strike a chord.
Yep.
And as far as how I presented them, there was a brief introduction. We did talk
Okay.
about these are
Awesome.
these were archival materials, and here's the historical significance, and they responded to that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. There is something about marches. I don't know. It has that it has that ability, it just I don't know, everybody just gets involved with it. It's like I do a lot of parade groups, where we're actually still marching and actually playing marches. And I for some reason I look and you just see people bopping to that drum beat, as you're going down the street. And it's old Sousa style marches, and they just
Well, and there's a bit of a stigma actually in our modern pedagogy, where for example, a lot of adjudicated contests require a warm-up march.
yep.
It'll be your first piece on stage, and we'll offer some comments, but really we're waiting to get to the main course here. There's that, and then
Yep.
there's the fact that every band history lecture starts off with the fact that 100 years ago all bands played were marches, as if I mean, and certainly there was a need for a broadening and diversifying of the
Yep.
repertoire, and that's great. And
Yep.
I happen to believe that there's probably more great music being composed more consistently right now for
Hmm.
the medium than probably at any other time.
Right.
But yeah, it's not because these marches and such weren't of high quality and well crafted.
Right.
So there's that stigma there that doesn't need to exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And again, this is probably, as you say, see how many podcasts we could make. There's a whole thing about just marches, of how people avoid them. I know people who avoid the marches in the band world because of that. And of course, the popularity of them, and as I will say, I know a lot of people who just absolutely adore them. And technically, they were for entertainment. I mean, I know all music's for entertainment, but, a lot of people looked at the popularity for them, so one question I had was, after you did this project, and there might be something there. If there isn't, that's fine. Again, this is just as I'm doing this quest of continuing music education, right? I'm just interested. Actually, I have two questions. I'm interested to see what engaged you to go in this path of more historical groups, and look in Frank Simon and find this, which I know that you made a comment that the project became something more than you expected. And then also what you felt changed, if anything changed, as far as your education, not your education, but you as an educator helping others, after doing that project, if I may ask. And like I said, maybe something, maybe you didn't, but I'm just interested.
Kind of, well, first of all, an interest in history in general and the availability of the materials and of the archive.
Right.
My job there was librarian. And so every day I went and worked in a room with boxes and boxes of over 3,400 pieces of music that Frank Simon personally owned and donated to the university. 10 years worth of weekly radio broadcasts. It's awesome. Incredible just to walk in and see. So it was there staring me in the face. And, it hadn't been investigated. It was something that was unique to that university.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was that. And then just gaining an appreciation for the role of bands in society, how widespread this band culture was. I know every town in America probably has a Sousa story. And that's amazing. But there was so much more. And there were so many opportunities for just the everyday citizen to be involved in this part of the culture and in music making. I know that lives on to a great extent in some portions of the country, but the fact that, these large corporations would sponsor a band, the fact that, these concerts would attract the people they attracted, that it was such a source of civic pride and culture. And the extent to which this was so widespread was just amazing. The influence on school music programs, and the people who were involved, and my place in that, my very small place in that 100 years on.
Right.
But yeah, all of that was fascinating.
Right. Yeah, it's great. I know we all love technology, right? We can listen to music whenever we want, but I always think back in those ages where it was if there was a group in your town, you were there. And I think, unfortunately, and I'm not dissing technology because I love technology, hence we're talking, but, I really do, believe that, having that style where it's, or this passion where, there's a concert happening and everybody in the town's coming. And just like you said, the corporations are behind it. And it's that, that's to me, it's a community. I know that still exists in other areas, but I also know the downfall of it too. For example, my little town in Pennsylvania used to have like 7 different community groups, and there's sort of one that's surviving, so it's just, and it's just sad. It really is sad, kind of on this quest of everything. But so kind of in our ending of this podcast, I'm just kind of interested, what insights you might give us. You know me being this real side of community music and engaging adults and getting them out there. And I know, I know you sent some great, wonderful things already, but I'm just interested if you have any other things that you in questing others to help them with their music making, or in ensure their motivation in music making. Or, I mean, I know it's hard because we can't force people to come out and, play their instrument or sing or, be involved with music. But I always think about that carrot, and I'm sorry to use this analogy, but the carrot before, the horse, right? With the horse, oh, I'm going to move, I'm going to keep moving. And that motivation, of how we get individuals out there in the music making world. And I was just interested if you had anything else you want to offer in this, in this music making podcast, continuing adult education and lifelong learning. We'll use the big fancy words, but just interested.
It's that there's so much to do and so many avenues to explore. And, the experience of being a musician, it's impossible to exhaust all of the options that are available. And I personally, I come and find something to love about every day. And I'm sure that I learned something every day. There's the old saying that the more I learn, the less I know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always finding an area to dig deeper, or something, in my own professional work that I can hone or improve. There's another quotation I'll throw at you.
Okay.
That appears as a meme quite a bit. It's Rachmaninoff who said, music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music.
Mm-hmm.
It simply isn't. And to anyone who's burnt out on what they think the experience of being a musician is, or think that the options available to them have been exhausted, they simply haven't, because there's a fundamental human need and a thirst for the experience of, I guess, performing, but also just taking in music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the live music industry these days is bigger than it ever has been. Even if bands in the Sousa mold quite aren't part of that. I mean, look at what Taylor Swift is doing, for crying out loud.
Yep.
She's the example that comes to mind. People park in a parking lot outside of the stadium where she's singing, and pay something like $200 for a ticket to park and not go in, but just to be there, at that event and be part of that phenomenon. So there is a huge market and desire for that. And I think we can tap into that. I think that's really part of the role that we have, especially at the university level. I think a university, and I will say that I think our institution does this well on a number of levels, is to engage with the community. We're in a service-oriented, I tell students, a customer service profession. We are. So, to any colleagues or anything like that, that doesn't have, where there's not some component of the Department of Music or a program like that isn't accessible to the general public. I mean, directly and readily accessible for some sort of performance opportunity. I think I would urge them to investigate the possibility of making that available.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, your thought of Taylor Swift, I just wanted to point this out. I just had a conversation with a colleague of mine back at Penn State University, and she's a public school teacher. She was somebody I worked with through there, and she was just telling me that she was sharing the concerts of John Philip Sousa, and I thought you'd appreciate this. And the students were just amazed by the crowd that they had there. And I literally said to her, I go, tell the students it's like a Taylor Swift concert. Because that's exactly what it was. And it's for the band world, it's kind of like you said, it's sad, but we can tap into that today, because it's great that at least music is happening, but it's, in a realm of a band or orchestra or choir or that performance, it's just, there's something to say about, performing music, and hearing that music live,
The need that we all seem to have for it, the insatiable need we seem to have for it. Another quick thing, I was teaching high school when earbuds became a thing, and having them in your ears, 24 hours a day became a thing. And the administration of the particular school I was teaching at reacted in a way that might have seemed like a good idea at the time, but in retrospect was kind of knee-jerk. And that was to say, nope, we're prohibiting this. You can't have them in. And furthermore, if you do, we're either going to confiscate them or issue detention or further punishment or whatever. And I watched as student after student refused to give these things up, would sacrifice and forego lunch, time after school, and you name it. The ability to go to various practices and rehearsals or whatever, simply because they refuse to give up their music.
Wow.
Just the need to have that pumping into their ears constantly. And I think that speaks to a much larger need and a much larger commonality that we all have. Just this need to experience music. And to be in a profession where our purpose is to fulfill that need. I mean, it's just a great joy and a reward. And it's really humbling, to be honest, but it's a privilege.
Awesome. Well, that's just it. I mean, it being a privilege. And I think, sometimes we lose that in our world today. Music is a privilege, and it is great that there's people like you who are out there who are helping people make music, making music yourself. And I just want to thank you so much for, your continuing, I know it's probably hard to say it this way, but I will say it to another music teacher. It's like, thank you so much for, doing your years of service, because, it's people like you who continue helping others continue making music and pass that torch along to people, to people, to people, to people. So we keep it going, so it doesn't become a dying art. So I want to thank you for that. And but yeah, thank you so much for participating in this. Like I said, this is all just a fun endeavor that I started to talk to others. And like I said, thank you again. And I really appreciate, like I said, all your years of service and help, especially with community groups. So I will thank you.
Thank you so much. No, it was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun, and we'll do it in person next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Tim.
Hey, thank you.